Today, we're digging into one of the biggest medical myths out there. A story about a silent killer that completely changed how we see a super common illness. Let's jump in.
You know, for the longest time, this was just fact. If you got a stomach ulcer, doctors would tell you it was your stressful job, your worries, or maybe all that spicy food you were eating. The thinking was pretty simple. Nothing could possibly live in all that stomach acid. It was a straightforward answer, but as it turns out, it was completely wrong.
So what if that entire idea was just off? What if the real culprit wasn't stress at all, but something else? A tiny, microscopic invader that was hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered.
All right, let's meet this hidden culprit. The real reason most people get stomach ulcers isn't their lifestyle. It's a tiny bacterium called Helicobacter pylori, or, H. pylori for short.
So what exactly is H. pylori? Well, it's this little spiral-shaped germ that's basically a survival expert. It's figured out how to live in one of the most hostile places imaginable, your stomach. And get this, it sets up camp in the stomach lining of millions, and most of them have no clue it's even there.
Okay, this is where it gets really cool. How on earth does a tiny organism survive being dunked in powerful stomach acid 24/7? The answer is just pure biological genius. Let's break down how it pulls it off.
So here's the trick. First, H. pylori pumps out a special enzyme. That enzyme goes to work on urea, which is just floating around in your stomach. Now that reaction creates ammonia, and if you remember your high school chemistry, ammonia is alkaline, so it literally creates its own little neutralizing shield, a safe bubble of non-acidic space for it to live in. Absolutely brilliant. So the key takeaway here is that H. pylori isn't just toughing it out. It's not just tolerating the acid. It's actively outsmarting its environment. It's a clever little bit of chemistry that lets it burrow into the stomach's protective lining and just move right in.
For a lot of people, this little guy is a quiet tenant for years, even decades. But when things get out of balance, that silent infection can turn into a really painful problem.
So most people actually get infected with this thing when they're kids, usually from contaminated food or water. And what's wild is that it can then just hang out for 30, 40, maybe even 50 years without causing a single symptom. It's just dormant.
But then, for some people, something shifts. That balance gets disturbed. The bacteria's presence starts to wear down the stomach's defenses, and that's when you start to feel it. That classic gnawing, burning pain in your gut, the bloating, the nausea. Those are all signs that the silent infection is now a very active problem, and it could be on its way to causing a full-blown ulcer.
And you can just picture the difference, right? On one hand, you've got a healthy stomach with a nice, thick protective lining. But on the other hand, after a long-term H. pylori infection, that lining gets worn down, it gets weakened, and it allows the stomach's own acid to start burning a sore, an ulcer, right into the stomach wall.
And, we have to talk about the long game here. In some chronic cases that go untreated, this constant inflammation and damage can actually lead to more serious problems down the road. Over time, it can increase the risk of developing stomach cancer, which is a huge reason why finding and treating H. pylori is so critical.
So the big question is, how did we go from blaming stress to hunting down a bacterium? Well, this discovery didn't just change ulcer treatment, it turned it completely upside down, and even won a Nobel Prize. I mean, just think about this timeline for a second. Before 1982, if you had an ulcer, that was pretty much it. It was a chronic disease for life, something you just had to manage, and sometimes it even meant major surgery. But then, two scientists proved the link to H. pylori, and believe me, they faced so much skepticism. But they stuck with it, and in 2005, they won the Nobel Prize for their work. And today, the cure is often just a simple round of antibiotics.
And that's the real game changer. Modern treatment doesn't just put a bandage on the problem. It doesn't just quiet the symptoms for a little while. It goes straight to the source. You get rid of the bacteria, you get rid of the cause, and the stomach can finally heal itself for good.
When you boil it all down, this whole story really drives home one powerful idea. Understanding what's really causing a problem is always the first and most important step to actually fixing it.
And that brings us to what we can do now. Knowing H. pylori spreads through contamination, it puts a huge spotlight on things that seem simple but are incredibly effective. Good hygiene, clean and safe drinking water, and this is a big one, actually getting checked out when symptoms first show up. These steps can literally prevent years of silent damage. At the end of the day, this is so much bigger than just a story about stomach ulcers. It's a perfect example of how science is supposed to work.
You don't make progress by holding on to old ideas. You make progress by asking questions, by being skeptical, and by having the guts to challenge what everyone else thinks is true.
So the next time you hear about some big medical mystery, just remember H. pylori. Remember the tiny spiral-shaped organism that figured out how to live in acid, and in doing so completely changed our view of what was possible? It just goes to show you, sometimes the biggest revolutions really do come from the smallest places.